Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes Podcast. Today we're joined by Greg Anderson, who's the founder and CEO of Jedari. How are you, Greg?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Let's just go into the name real quick because you just said it before the camera started rolling. It's a great name.
Yeah, thank you. Jedari means Jedi level technology wrapped in the elegance of Armani. And the story was a few years ago, I'm in Southern California. I'm getting ready for like a black tie event. And I'm telling my friends, you know what I really love? I'd love like a Jedi like tunic, but something I could wear to a black tie, something of Armani. And this name kind of stuck with me. And then years later, it was like, oh, this is really where it comes from. This is really what we're going to use it for.
Yeah, I'd love to wear a tunic and not worry about dressing anymore. Right?
Right.
But some people do love the Armani and the Gucci of like, let's get dressed up.
Yep.
I am not in that camp, although I do appreciate a good looking suit and a fine wardrobe. But yeah, I'd be a tunic guy.
Yeah, tunic, that black tie-like style and comfortable.
Yeah, comfortable. And
yeah.
It's like, it's breezy in here.
100%.
Where's your lightsaber?
Yeah, that's right. No. And then it circled back when we really understood what Jedari was. Like when we understood the technology we were building, it was like,
perfect.
That's it.
Yeah, so let's go into what is Jedari for those that aren't in the know.
Yeah, Jedari is, who we serve is a elite community-driven businesses and brands. That means companies that serve their community on a digital landscape. And that might be if I gave you kind of a framework. And all of this technology is ours, so the names that I'm using is just for framework, right?
Yeah.
But if you took Facebook, if you took Zoom, WhatsApp, Stripe, and they had a baby, and that baby was white labeled to only your company, that's what we do. So we built a piece of technology that allows us to white label a whole iOS, Android, website, community management tool. And some people might use it for coaching because they have 1,000 coaches that are on their platform, and it manages their billing and it does those things. And other people like a multi-level marketing company or a NASCAR car, like a team, they use it for their fans. They want to bring them in, and everything about that is curated to them. So one of the things that happened to us is we started looking in 2019 what was happening with shadow banning then, and thought, man, at some point in time, we're not going to be able to speak. Yeah. So what if we built a platform that was a media distribution channel but had nothing to do about us?
Yeah.
It was you and your message or your group or your church group or whoever that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that because growing up, if you wanted exposure to like the NFL or NASCAR, there needed to be a really well done documentary.
Right.
And I don't have any of the apps that you just described, so I'm perpetually on the outside looking in. But there's a lot of people that want to be included in that.
Yeah.
I do like NASCAR, so I'll kind of zero in on that. There's so much more that goes into NASCAR than the 2 hours when they're racing on Sunday.
Right.
And it's almost as interesting.
Yeah.
And if you're able to let people in, I would imagine it's a net benefit for everyone. Like the fans are entertained, the drivers, the crew chiefs are seen as humans, not like chattel. And they see the business side of it, right? Of like, oh, they actually like have to watch their dollars and cents.
Yeah.
And you could probably get bigger and better sponsors, monetize it, and get more people wearing your driver's shirts, right?
Yeah, and the driver scenario, you put 10, 20, 30,000 people into your own community and you're sharing live streams about engine setup or whatever that is, right? And that fan wants to consume that kind of content because they want to be part of the team.
Yeah.
They'd be super happy to pay $29 a month for it or $59 or even 10. And now you're talking about adding in many more millions to their bottom line on a revenue stream they've never had before.
Yeah. Yeah. I like you gave a couple of examples of had a baby because there's been a lot of folks, and usually it's like in and around hunting or fishing, or you're working with something, you're like, I wish this and this would have a baby.
Yep, 100%.
And life would be so much better, right?
100%.
Like, well, somebody should do it.
Yep.
Because like a lot of times in life, you're like, we're 60% of the way there.
Right.
But man, imagine if we got to 100.
Yeah. And you get stuck in that spot where you're like, I can't find anything that's better than 60.
Yeah.
So either we get to be happy with 60 or we got to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
where we were. It was like, all of these things don't work because nothing was integrated. And we were having a conversation a minute ago about, different softwares trying to API together and talk. And sometimes it breaks and it doesn't work. And at some point in time, you either say, we're good with that or we're not. And in this scenario, we saw the world kind of grow up with social media and engage. And now we're seeing the world like tribe down. They're like, you know what? I don't like the fact that I might only see 5% of what somebody that I'm really interested in seeing their posts and those communications, because they're not fitting in their algorithm, or somebody didn't like what they had to say, or they turned off their ability to make money, because it happens every day.
Yeah.
We're like, that doesn't really feel very good. And somebody, which ended up to be us, I tried for a year not to build it. I'm like, no, I'll find somebody else.
Yeah.
That we were like, no, we really want that. Whether it was a group about people that loved hunting, and they still get shadow banned on social media. Even if they're talking about their hunting spot or a specific ammunition, that gets flagged on all kinds of things. And it's very honest what they're talking about. So I said, let's create something for them.
Yeah. Can't turn it off.
Right.
Very nice.
Right.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, this is what we want. And what we loved is, if it's, let's say it's a paid community.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't like what your community is about, they just leave.
Yeah.
You don't have to argue or go say, hey, I don't like them. Can you shut them down? You're just like, no, I'll vote with my dollars if I want to be here.
Oh, there's $29 less in the bank account than there was yesterday. Looks like somebody left.
100%. I love that.
I've been lucky in life to be in a lot of really cool settings and interact with a lot of cool people where I leave and I'm like, that's a dirty shame that there was only 8 of us in the room for that, right?
Yeah.
And it's, there's certain times where you want everything turned off and we're just going to have a conversation. But, there's lots of times where you're like, man, there's 1,000 people that really would have benefited from that. And if I'm understanding what you guys have built, there's an application for even something as simple as that.
Yeah. I was living in Mexico several years ago. I went nomadic for lots of different reasons. And I went and I started studying with Mayans. And for years I was traveling, and I would go to and live with monks in a monastery for a little while, or I would go to this event or go to this church group, right? And all of them had these really great like hearts, and I wanted to stay connected with people. And what I found out was happening is, anytime somebody was holding a prayer or even a meditation on like a Facebook, because they want it to be global, because not everybody can be in the same location at the same time, even family prayer. It was like having a prayer in the middle of Walmart. Yeah. It was, people are like opening up your lives and they're like making fun of you, and it just, energy wasn't clean. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a platform that only allows people to pray and meditate together globally and digitally. And so I built it. Its name was One Mind. It's not in existence anymore. And I ran it for a year, 1,000 meditations and prayers on it, and really cool things like Lend a Prayer, which was, hey, my brother's sick, and on Thursday at 6 p.m., we're going to hold a prayer for him. Is there anybody in the community that could join in? And as I was closing the doors and really sitting on it, because I couldn't get mass adoption and they're just expensive texts, I looked at it and it came back that I had built that for like our initiative. And I didn't build it for anybody else to make money on it. So when a co-founder came to me and shared me his problem that he was having as a personal development coach with 1,000 clients and just all the fulfillment pieces, I looked back at what I was doing with One Mind and thought, you know what? I can build this in a way that I could white label it for any size of community, for any purpose. If a church wants to run digitally, they can. If people want to talk about Beanie Babies, they can.
Yeah.
And it was really built with that intention that whatever that container is, whatever you're creating, that you can have a place for your people, and that's your place.
Yeah. I love that. The meditation and prayer thing's very interesting, that it was the catalyst to this.
Yeah.
Little sidebar here, like when you approach a group as a nomadic guy from America, the Mayans. Yeah. How do you say, hey, I'd like to kind of just hang out for a while?
You know, you just kind of show up. I decided at one point in time, I'm here in the United States, and I think I'm at the top of my game. And I know that I'm not operating like as well as I can. I know I'm under a lot of stress and pressure. And one of my belief systems now is everybody that's been born on this planet, we were born with one thing in common. We didn't know anything when we were born. Mm-hmm. And our parents, our society, our church, our governments taught us how to speak and act and think. If I were born in China, then I would think and act and speak differently. Just how humans get programmed. And I was going through a process. I'd already lived with some monks in Italy at a piece of time, and I was trying to unlearn all of these restrictions. And I learned something about myself, which was I was trained in my family and in my life that success looked like MTV or success looked like James Bond. That means you got to make a lot of money and you're spending things and you're running super fast. It was so stressful. And I was trying to go through a process of how do I unlearn what people told me so I could be more me. And at one moment I decided all of these processes happened and it just was a point. You're selling everything you have and you're moving to Mexico. I didn't know anybody down there. I didn't speak Spanish.
Oh, wow.
I just, God told me to go. I'm like, well, I'm going.
Yeah.
And I made it down there. I rented a car and I drove from Cancun all the way back up to Mexico City, which took me a month because I took a lot of time to go up and back. And I would open up a map and say, where do I feel inspired to go? And I'd find an old civilization. I would show up. And at first, there'll be little guides that will come and say, hey, let me guide you around. And I was going really wild. I didn't cut my hair for 3 years. And I was going through this whole process. And I would just speak to them and say, I'm trying to learn what your ancestors learned. Mm-hmm. I'd like to learn, how did the government work? How did your religious leaders talk to you? How did people live? And all of these little civilizations were teaching me. And the more they taught me in that kind of world, first, I realized that I was kind of judgy. You get to a third world country and immediately you think, oh man, how could I help them? How could I get them into a better house or a better car? And then you look at it and you're like, wow, you're pretty judgy about that. They're probably happier than you.
Oh yeah.
With what they have.
Yep.
And so I got to learn what it was like to be in their shoes and not have any of those judgmental pieces and super opening, inviting. There were a couple times I came to places and it was interesting things. Like I had this one family say, we've been waiting for you for a year. We were told a year ago you were going to come. And here's what this is. And I stayed and learned and trained with them. Wow. It just kind of helped me unwind who I thought I was so I could be me now.
Yeah. What an amazing experience that is. That'd be like a 15-hour podcast. So you're unwinding. And so this was 3 or 4 years, it sounds like?
It was 3 years in that experience and it ended just before 2020. So that's when I came back here.
Good timing.
Full time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was like all the world fell apart like a month after I got back. I'm like, I'm divinely guided in this one.
Yeah. Without knowing you, this is our first real interaction. Seems like you're prompted by your feelings and intuition and what you're being told from a higher place.
Yeah. It took a little while to kind of get there because at first you're just going, am I just crazy or do I just want something different? But the more that you get out of your own way, several years ago, I produced this video as part of a coaching program that I had, which was talking about the difference and how first the difference of prayer and meditation and then how they meet together, where prayer is this one-way conversation about, whatever's happening in life and thankful. And the meditation, that time afterwards, which is contemplation or quiet time, is the time to just listen. Mm-hmm. And when you get really quiet, the answers can come pretty heavily. It's loud. Yeah. And so I got to really learn that most of the decisions I made in life that were very consequential, in not the best way, I had something that was like, hey, Greg, that's probably not the right thing to do. And I was like, what? I'm going to do it anyway. And then all of a sudden, I've lived a life where I've never, I've been caught for everything I've ever done. I'm just that guy. And I can track back almost to a half hour before that was like, hey, you should probably leave. And I was like, nah, come on. Yeah. So I definitely listen as much as I can and then act with whatever that prompting was.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So you mentioned you get down there in the car and you're a bit judgy.
Oh yeah.
And you're unlearning, which I think a lot of people would benefit by doing.
Yeah.
If you gave yourself a report card of I was 100% judgy or whatever it is, that ratio.
Yep.
And then the 3 years after of unlearning, how big of a difference was it for you?
Golf from 0 to 100, probably somewhere in the 90s. And what it means is I still have things that will come up, but I catch myself frequently. My last year down there, I was studying with a specific teacher, and my practice was trying to get to a meditation practice of 14 hours a day, which I got to. And that's really loud in the mind when you're quiet, just yourself for that long.
Yeah.
And I learned a couple of you might call this an affirmation or a statement, but I learned something, which is I'm not willing to judge you because I'm not willing to judge me. And if I judge me, he's a jerk.
Yeah.
Like the internal Greg is not a good guy for Greg. And what I found is every time I judged somebody else, instantly the energy came back to me and I was judging something else about myself. And so it's not that I don't anymore, but when it comes up, I can catch it pretty quickly and go, whoa. Yeah, I don't want that. Like somebody might come to me and say, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? And what do you think about that? And my answer now is, I don't know. I'm not them.
Yeah.
It's not my place.
Yeah.
Like, aren't you mad? Like, I don't know that I should be. And they're like, okay, I can't talk to you anymore. I'm like, great. Go trauma bond with somebody else then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, like the gossip line stops at you.
Yeah,
Very
100%.
Nice. Yeah. 14 hours.
14 hours.
What's that like?
14 hours is like 3 or 4 hours of not movement. Now there's this one form of meditation that I use and I can share it in 30 seconds. And it basically means that you imagine a clock about a round clock with numbers, not a digital, but with the hands about 6 to 12 inches in front of your face. And your whole job is to take the big hand and the little hand and keep it at 12 o'clock the whole time. Because the human mind, we're designed, our psychology is trying to orient us in time and space at all times. And I can't tell you how many times I used to think about how much money was in my bank account. Mm-hmm. Or, did I forget about groceries? Or, whatever it was. It's saying, do I still have all these problems? And that practice is it's like going to the gym and creating like a really mental toughness that you can just say, nope, I'm staying at 12. And so it's not that you're just floating into space. It was like running a marathon in the brain, teaching it how to hold 12 so that now as I'm driving down the street or having a conversation, I find if I start falling off of 12, it's because I'm not necessarily 100% present. My brain's thinking about something else. I'm like, oh, come back to 12.
Gotcha.
So it was a heavy exercise. And it's one of the coolest things about meditation is nobody's ever really meditated. As nobody's ever really exercised. It's a container word. Yeah. Like jogging is a form of exercise, but so is weight training and so is yoga. And with meditation, there's tons of different types and they all do something different. Like if I'm a power lifter, I'm not going to train as a marathon runner. And what I was looking for was mental strength so that when things got tough or, judgments or whatever came up into the mind, I could just pull myself right back out of it.
Very cool. What was hour 15 like then after that 14 hours for like your physical body and then your brain?
Yeah, you don't really turn it off after 14 hours.
Yeah.
But you are pretty exhausted, especially building into it. Like my first 2 years would be like, how do I go from 15 minutes to 20 minutes? And then how do you go into 30? And then it just kept getting more and more and more. And I could probably give you the best difference. Like when I came back out, I didn't want to stop. Because by the time you're there, it's you and it's so quiet and it's so peaceful and there's not a lot of like outside pressures telling you because you have to learn how to focus everything out.
Yeah.
And so then wanting to come back into society and going, okay, well, I need to work again. Like I need to make money for my family and I get to do these things. It's like, oh, I don't want to. I want to go back because it was just me. I didn't have to deal with other people. So at first it was hard and then you fall into it and it just feels so good. You just don't want anything else.
Gotcha. Very cool. So I was hoping there would be like some silver bullet from 0 to 14 hours, but it sounds like there's not. It's like 5-minute increments.
Kind of. And what I learned is I used to believe that anything really great was really hard. Did it require, could somebody else do what I did inside 15 minutes a day, just using that one practice that I shared with you? Probably. It doesn't require living in jungles and studying with ants and, doing those things have really beautiful lessons, but no, you could just do it with simple exercises and not everybody has to do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you're building Jedari and you've got all of the things you're trying to unlearn still
Yeah,
hit you in the face occasionally.
100%.
How do you apply what you learned over those 3 years into a more hectic, frenetic life?
Yeah. I would say like the difference between pre and now is pre, I remember a few times stressing about payroll and paying people so much that I felt like I had ulcers and I would lay under my desk at my office. I didn't want anybody to know I was in that much pain. I don't have that anymore. Things are definitely hard and it's, it's difficult, but it doesn't like change my mood. There's a line in Harry Potter that comes up all the time, which is like Ron's drinking this like tea and he says, he's reading, Harry's divination or whatever. And he's like, hey, you're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it. And that's really what comes up. It doesn't mean it's hard. It just emotionally doesn't impact me anymore. So what happens then is I learned how that all of these other people and situations, because I never spent enough time inside my own body to like learn how to manage it. What happens when stress gets really bad? Instead of allowing it to get stressful, I just learn how to manage it in my body better. Yeah. So that now when something comes up, I still follow a meditation practice. I still have a prayer practice. I still have a workout practice. But it allows me to take on probably 10 or 20 times more business and decisions in easier ways than I could before.
Wow. And it's all recent and fresh enough that you notice the differences.
100%. Yeah, I'm
Very
about
cool.
4 years out of that. And inside that 4 years, when I came back out, I had a little income that from a previous project that I had built. It was almost gone. It wasn't enough to live on. And then inside of those 4 years, we've now built 2 different coaching companies and this technology company that was built to help them. And in Jedari, we've launched 300 different communities, so 300 different companies, put on 200,000 end users. Our clients have made about $5 million in cash so far from our projects. And I've been able to do that without like hurting myself.
Yeah.
Because I think before I was hurting myself because I just didn't understand it, how to
Yeah.
manage that much pressure.
Yeah. You seem like an interesting, kind of juxtaposition because to build Jedari and things you've done in your life, it's systems and processes, right?
Yep.
You can't jump and go ahead. You got to do this and tie that in. But then with your 4 years in the jungle, it's kind of opposite of that. It's like, who cares?
Yeah. There was a process getting me there for sure. And, just a quick story about that is as I was learning a little bit more about what's just called subconscious programming, it's how we were programmed to speak or why I might say things like my mom, because I heard them so often.
Yeah.
And one night I was coming home to my house and I left a concert and I walked into my closet and I had 100 or 200 t-shirts. I don't know why I needed that many, but I did. And for whatever reason, it's probably around a book I was reading. I grabbed one of the shirts and said, what do you remind me of? And it reminded me of a concert that I went to 5 years previous with a girl I didn't know anymore. And I thought, how interesting. I wonder if my brain subconsciously sees that shirt and thinks about this experience every time. It's like, oh. So I went through my closet and just said, what do you remind me of? And if it wasn't somebody current, like in my current reality, then I just started like donating all the things. And then I went through my house and I was like, well, where's all this furniture from? Who picked it? And it wasn't me. And so it was kind of this like snowball that was just like clear. If it was causing me pieces like Steve Jobs and even now, Zuckerberg, it's the same clothes all the time so they can make less decisions about small things. It was that kind of mentality. I was like, well, I don't want all of these inputs. And it led me into a space where I started getting rid of furniture. And then all of a sudden I had this opportunity and like, okay, I'm going. So it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, I'm out. It was a process that was unfolding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep a lot of things too. And people in my life have accused me of being a hoarder. But it was a lot of those same reasons. Like, no, I remember this T-shirt or this knickknack.
Yeah.
It's because it was fun and it was a great memory.
Yeah. And there's times to keep all of those. And then there's times where, I was divorced at the time and the shirt was like from something. I was like, do I need it?
Yeah.
But I still keep like knickknacks and boxes of things for my family and that are important to me.
Yeah.
But it was the others that I was like, not important.
I might need to take that page out of your book there.
Well, if you do, let me know if it helps you feel, if it's like, oh, that's light. That feels light.
Yeah. Yeah, you do feel lighter after you go to DI, and it's like, all right, good.
Yep, that feels nice. There's actually some psychology behind it.
What's the future for Jedari, right? Because you guys have had to build it and system architect it and decide like what people will pay and all of those. How do you guys grow and scale and serve the communities?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because when you start a technology, or probably start any company, you have an idea of what it is, and it takes a while to unfold for it to become that thing. And for us, we launched our minimal viable product, our MVP, our first version in January of 23, and I knew exactly what it was and who our clients were. And over a 6 or 7 month period of time, I learned about all of the things where when you're putting something together that wasn't designed to go together at first, you learned all the ways that it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And in order to fix that or rebuild it, because you put the puzzle together once and you're missing a couple pieces and you just re-engineer, we learned a few things. Like in the world of managing community, there's lots of different companies, and there's only a few that are global and like top tier. And everybody serves their own place. And what happened with us is we took on such large companies early. We had to build a software that now no other competitor can do what we do. We might serve the same type of people, and give you an example of that. If I'm on a company and I'm using a community platform that has more than 2,000 people on it, that's about where every other community on the planet caps. They cap you at putting 2,000 people on a live stream at once. Ours is 200,000. And the purpose was we were having problems in the beginning. We're like, well, this doesn't work. How can I model another company that's done something really big? And so I just went to the New York Stock Exchange. So what's the tech that they run in? How is it architected? And we looked at how we were architected and we're like, oh man, that doesn't work. Let's rebuild the whole thing. And so as we redid that build, which is just like a pivot, you never want to rebuild something, but you pivot. Yeah. We learned that who we serve are really like the elite companies and the elite brands that probably have more than a few hundred members, all the way into the hundreds of thousands, moving into the millions if we required it. We just don't have somebody that's that big yet. So we look at it like, as you know, as the world tribes down into their groups, there are still groups that are huge. Yeah. There are groups with millions and millions of people on it that, you know, I don't know if you know this or not, because you said you don't have a Facebook account, but if you did, and you have a community, 5,000 people in it, whatever you're talking about, Facebook's like algorithms and AI is reading it, and it's delivering ads to your people based on what you're talking about. They know it's a paid community. Or if we're talking and I'm like, hey, I'm at Home Depot, I'm looking at this lawnmower. That lawnmower ad will show, not because I was on the Home Depot site, because they're reading our direct messages. We're like, this just does not work. This is not okay. Yeah. And so that's how we're serving, is we're saying, hey, we're going to give you a white labeled experience where nobody even knows Jedari exists. Your communities, like everything looks like you built it. And then you can really control that destiny. So in our local communities too, it's all of these different networks that maybe want some privacy, or they want to own the emails or the credit card numbers or whatever those things are that you can't do in those outside worlds, because communication is key. Media distribution channels are key. When we can't trust where that's coming from, then how do we really serve? And so we're like, let's build something that's not about us, where I can't dictate what you want to say. Yeah. That's how we're coded. It's your community, and that's great. So we love to serve from small families that are like, hey, I want something for my family so that we can come together and we can have our own social media experience and, you know, Zoom experience, even though it's not Zoom, it's ours. But, or those really large organizations like NASCAR and things like that we've talked about.
I love it.